The air inside the first-class cabin was freezing, but it had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the look on the flight attendant's face when she pointed a trembling finger at the exit. "Sir, you need to leave. Now. We have a priority passenger who needs this seat." Marcus sat motionless, his hand resting on a leather briefcase that contained the fate of the entire airline. He looked at the woman smirking behind the attendant, a woman who thought her skin color was a VIP pass. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Marcus asked, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Because once I stand up, none of you will have a job to sit back down to." They thought he was bluffing. They didn't know they were kicking off the man who owned the plane. The chaos at JFK International Airport was palpable, a swirling storm of frustrated travelers, crying infants, and the distinctive, rhythmic clacking of luggage wheels on polished terrazzo. But inside the exclusive lounge of Meridian Airways, the atmosphere was meant to be a sanctuary. Marcus Thorne sat in the corner of the lounge, sipping a sparkling water. To the casual observer, he didn't look like a titan of industry. He was dressed in a charcoal hoodie, dark denim jeans, and a pair of pristine, albeit understated, sneakers. He had no entourage, no flashy gold watch, and he wasn't shouting into a cell phone. He was simply reading a paperback novel, enjoying the silence before the storm he knew was coming. Marcus was the newly appointed CEO of Helios Holdings, the parent company that had acquired Meridian Airways 3 days ago in a secret, closed-door deal. The ink was barely dry. The press release wasn't scheduled until the following morning. Today, he was flying from New York to London to visit the headquarters personally. He wanted to see the operation from the ground level, not as Mr. Thorne, the boss, but as Marcus, the passenger. He wanted to know why Meridian was bleeding money. He was about to find out. "Excuse me." A sharp voice cut through his concentration. Marcus looked up. Standing over him was a woman who radiated expensive impatience. She wore a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than the average car, and her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She held a glass of champagne as if it were a weapon. "You're in my spot," she said. She didn't ask. She stated it. Marcus glanced around. The lounge was at perhaps 40% capacity. There were dozens of empty leather armchairs, many with better views of the tarmac. "I wasn't aware the seats were assigned in the lounge," Marcus said, his voice deep and smooth. He offered a polite, closed-lip smile and returned to his book. The woman scoffed, a harsh sound that drew the attention of the lounge receptionist. "I usually sit here. The lighting is better for my selfies. Move." "I'm quite comfortable, thank you," Marcus replied, turning a page. "There's a lovely seat right over there by the window." The woman's face flushed a deep, indignant pink. She turned on her heel and marched toward the reception desk. Marcus watched her go over the rim of his glass. He recognized the type. He had dealt with sharks in boardrooms who had more grace than this woman. He noted the name on the luggage tag swinging from her designer bag as she turned, Eleanor Vance. Minutes later, a lounge manager named Gregory hurried over. Gregory looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from years of saying yes to unreasonable people. "Sir," Gregory said, wringing his hands, "I'm terribly sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to relocate." Marcus closed his book, keeping his finger on the page to mark his place. "Is there a problem with my ticket, Gregory?" "No, sir, not at all. It's just, Mrs. Vance is a Platinum Legacy member. She's very particular. And I am a paying passenger with a first-class ticket," Marcus said. "I arrived here first. I'm seated. I'm staying." Gregory looked at Eleanor, who was glaring from the bar, tapping her foot. He looked back at Marcus. He saw a black man in a hoodie. He saw a path of least resistance. "Sir, please don't make a scene. It's just a seat." "Exactly," Marcus said, his eyes hardening. "It is just a seat, so she can find another one." Gregory sighed, clearly making a mental calculation that Marcus wasn't worth the hassle, but Eleanor Vance, whose husband, Marcus recalled, was a minor politician in the state, was a headache he couldn't afford. But Gregory retreated. He didn't have the authority to physically move a passenger. "Fine," Eleanor's voice carried across the room as Gregory delivered the bad news. "If you won't handle the riffraff here, I'll make sure the crew handles it on the plane." Unbelievable. Marcus went back to his book, but his mind was no longer on the story. He was working. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick, encrypted text to his chief of staff, Linda. "Check the employment file for a lounge manager named Gregory at JFK, and pull up the passenger manifest for Flight 404. I want to know everything about an Eleanor Vance." He stood up when the boarding call came. As he walked toward the gate, he felt the heavy gaze of Eleanor burning into his back. She was on a phone call, speaking loudly. "I don't care who he is, Richard. It's about standards. They're letting anyone into first class these days. He looks like a thug. It makes me feel unsafe. I'm going to speak to the captain." Marcus tightened his grip on his briefcase. The test had begun. The interior of the Boeing 777 was luxurious, bathed in soft, ambient mood lighting. Seat 1A was a suite, complete with sliding doors for privacy. Marcus settled in, placing his briefcase in the overhead bin. He declined the pre-flight champagne, opting for water. He wanted a clear head. He observed the crew. They were frantic, disorganized. The purser, a man named Bradford with a perfectly gelled comb-over and a smile that didn't reach his eyes, was rushing up and down the aisle, barking orders at the junior flight attendants. "Jennifer, get that trash out of the aisle. Sarah, why aren't the hot towels ready?" It was a toxic work environment. Marcus noted this. Middle management incompetence, he thought, focusing on optics rather than service. Then Eleanor Vance boarded. She made an entrance, slamming her bag down in seat 1D, directly across the aisle from Marcus. She glared at him, then immediately hit the call button. She hit it 3 times in rapid succession. Ding, ding, ding. Bradford appeared instantly. "Mrs. Vance, welcome back. So wonderful to see you. Is everything to your liking?" "No, Bradford, it isn't," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at Marcus. "I thought I made it clear in the lounge. I do not feel comfortable sitting across from him." Bradford glanced at Marcus. Marcus was looking out the window, watching the ground crew load cargo. "I understand, Mrs. Vance," Bradford whispered, though in the quiet cabin it was audible. "But the flight is fully booked. Seat 1A is assigned to him." "Check again," Eleanor snapped. "He looks like he belongs in economy or on a no-fly list. Did you check his ticket? Did you actually check it? Or did you just let him through because of some diversity quota?" The racism was no longer subtle. It was out in the open, ugly and naked. Bradford straightened up. He looked at Marcus, analyzing him. Hoodie, jeans, quiet demeanor. Then he looked at Eleanor Vance, a woman who tipped poorly, but complained loudly to corporate. Bradford, like Gregory in the lounge, made a calculation. He preferred the devil he knew. Bradford walked over to seat 1A. He didn't smile this time. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass again, please?" Marcus turned slowly. "I scanned it at the gate. I showed it to the attendant at the door." "Yes, but there seems to be a discrepancy in the system," Bradford lied smoothly. "I need to verify you are in the correct seat." Marcus reached into his pocket and produced the boarding pass. Marcus Thorne. Seat 1A, first class. Bradford looked at it. He frowned. There was no discrepancy. The ticket was valid, full fare, purchased via a corporate account. But Eleanor was watching, her arms crossed, waiting for a show. "Right," Bradford said, handing it back. "Well, sir, here is the situation. We have a double booking error. It's a computer glitch. Very common." "A double booking," Marcus repeated, "on a specific seat assignment that I selected weeks ago." "Yes," Bradford said, his confidence growing. "And unfortunately, Mrs. Vance is a priority member with higher status. Per airline policy, when there is a conflict, we prioritize our loyalty members. I'm going to have to ask you to move." "Move where?" Marcus asked. "We have a seat available in Economy Plus. It's quite comfortable. Extra legroom." "You want me to downgrade from a seat I paid $6,000 for to move to economy so she doesn't have to look at me?" Marcus asked. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop. "It's not about her, sir," Bradford lied again. "It's a system error. If you don't move voluntarily, we will have to view this as non-compliance." "Non-compliance?" Marcus chuckled darkly. "That's a heavy word, Bradford. Are you sure you want to use it?" "I am the purser on this flight," Bradford said, puffed up with petty authority. "I decide who flies and where they sit. Now grab your bag. You're holding up departure." From across the aisle, Eleanor laughed. "Go on. Back of the bus." Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt. He didn't stand up yet. He leaned forward. "Bradford, I'm going to give you one chance to walk away. Go back to the galley, pour Mrs. Vance a drink, and let me fly in peace. If you force me to move, you are violating federal aviation regulations regarding ticketed passengers, and you are discriminating against me based on bias. I suggest you think very carefully." Bradford's face turned red. He wasn't used to passengers pushing back with legal terminology. He was used to people getting scared. "Are you threatening me?" Bradford snapped. "I'm advising you," Marcus said. "That's it," Bradford said, grabbing his radio. "Captain, we have a disruptive passenger in 1A. Refusing crew instructions. Aggressive behavior. I need security at the gate immediately." He clicked off the radio and looked down at Marcus with a sneer. "You wanted to play lawyer? Now you can play defendant. You're not going to economy. You're getting off the plane." Marcus sat back. He felt the vibration of the phone in his pocket. Linda had replied. "Eleanor Vance, wife of Richard Vance. 3 previous complaints of verbal abuse toward staff. Never banned because her husband approves the airport zoning permits. Bradford Mills, purser. 7 years employed. 2 formal reprimands for unprofessional conduct. We own the airline, Marcus. You have the codes." Marcus looked at Bradford. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." "Get your bag," Bradford spat. "Police are on their way." The other passengers in first class were watching in stunned silence. Some looked uncomfortable. Others, like a businessman in 1F, looked angry at the delay. But nobody spoke up. Nobody defended the quiet man in the hoodie. They were relieved it wasn't them. Marcus stood up. He towered over Bradford. He reached up and opened the overhead bin, retrieving his leather briefcase. "Fine," Marcus said. "I'll get off. But I'm taking my business with me." "We don't need your business," Eleanor called out. "We have standards." Marcus paused in the aisle. He looked at Eleanor. "Enjoy the flight, Mrs. Vance. It will be the last one you ever take on this airline." He walked toward the aircraft door, where 2 Port Authority police officers were waiting. Bradford followed him, smug and victorious, ready to give his statement. As they stepped onto the jet bridge, the cold air hit them. "This is the gentleman?" the officer asked, gesturing to Marcus. "Yes," Bradford said. "Aggressive, threatening the crew, refused to move seats when asked for operational reasons." The officer looked at Marcus. "Sir, I need to see ID." Marcus handed over his passport. He also handed over a sleek, black titanium card. It wasn't a credit card. It was an identity card with the Helios Holdings logo embossed in gold. The officer looked at the card, then at Marcus. "I need to make a phone call," Marcus said calmly. "Before you arrest me, I suggest you let me make it, unless you want to explain to the police commissioner why you arrested the man who pays the airport's landing fees." The officer hesitated. He saw the name on the titanium card. Marcus Thorne, chairman. "Make the call," the officer said. Bradford scoffed. "He's bluffing. Just cuff him." Marcus dialed. He put it on speaker. "This is Linda," the voice on the other end answered instantly. "Sir, I'm watching the cabin feed. I saw what happened." "Linda," Marcus said, his voice echoing in the metal tunnel of the jet bridge. "Initiate Protocol 0 for Flight 404. Ground the plane, revoke the flight status of the entire cabin crew, and get the airport director down here. Now." "Done," Linda said. Bradford laughed nervously. "Who is that? Your girlfriend? You can't ground a plane." Suddenly, the lights inside the jet bridge flickered. The hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power unit whined down. Inside the plane, the lights went out. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, audible through the open door. "Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to have lost power. All systems are shutting down. We are being denied clearance for pushback by corporate. Stand by." Bradford's radio chirped. It was the captain. "Bradford, what is going on? Operations just red-flagged the flight. They said the CEO is on site. Who is on site?" Bradford froze. He looked at the man in the hoodie. He looked at the titanium card in the police officer's hand. Marcus stepped closer to Bradford. "I told you," Marcus whispered. "I'm not a passenger. I'm the owner." The silence in the jet bridge was heavier than the humid, stale air that had begun to accumulate now that the aircraft's circulation systems were dead. The only sound was the heavy breathing of Bradford, the purser, whose face had transitioned from a flush of anger to a pale, waxen mask of confusion. The two Port Authority officers exchanged a glance. They were trained to read body language, to assess threats. The man in the hoodie, Marcus Thorne, was standing with a posture that wasn't defensive. It was commanding. He wasn't leaning away from them. He was standing his ground like a statue made of iron. "What did you mean, owner?" Bradford stammered, his voice cracking. "Helios Holdings is an investment firm. They deal in tech and real estate. They don't run airlines." Marcus didn't answer him. He looked at his watch. "Michael Sterling should be rounding the corner in about 30 seconds. I suggest you straighten your tie, Bradford. You look sloppy." "Who is Michael Sterling?" the junior officer asked. "The Director of Operations for JFK Terminal 4, the senior officer replied, holstering his taser. He looked at Marcus with a new, terrified respect. "If you summoned Sterling and he's actually coming," the sound of running footsteps echoed from the terminal side of the jet bridge door. The heavy security door swung open with a bang, hitting the stopper. Michael Sterling burst onto the bridge. He was a man in his 50s, wearing a navy suit that was slightly rumpled, likely from the sprint. He was followed by two assistants, holding tablets, and a grim-faced woman who looked like legal counsel. Sterling stopped, scanning the group. His eyes bypassed the police, bypassed the trembling flight attendant, and locked onto the man in the hoodie. Sterling's face drained of color. He composed himself, smoothed his jacket, and walked over to Marcus with a speed that bordered on a jog. "Mr. Thorne," Sterling gasped, extending a hand that shook slightly. "My apologies. My sincere apologies. I was in a budget meeting when the priority alert came through. We didn't know you were traveling today. If we had known..." "If you had known..." "What?" Marcus asked, ignoring the handshake. His voice was low, echoing off the metal walls. You would have hidden the rot. You would have polished the surface so I wouldn't see what's underneath." Sterling pulled his hand back, swallowing hard. "Sir, I assure you, Meridian Airways prides itself on—" "Save the press release, Michael." Marcus cut him off. He gestured to Bradford. "Do you know this man?" Sterling looked at Bradford. "Yes, that's Mr. Mills, senior purser." "Mr. Mills just attempted to have me arrested," Marcus said, his tone conversational, which made it all the more terrifying. "He called the police on me because I refused to vacate a first-class seat I paid for, simply because a platinum member didn't like the color of my skin." Sterling spun around to face Bradford. The director's eyes were wide with fury. "Bradford, tell me you didn't." He was disruptive," Bradford squeaked, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. "He wouldn't follow crew instructions. Mrs. Vance, Eleanor Vance, she was uncomfortable. You know how important the Vances are to the terminal expansion project. I was trying to protect the airline's interests." "You idiot," Sterling whispered, clutching his forehead. "You absolute, colossal idiot." "I was following protocol," Bradford insisted, though his confidence was disintegrating like wet paper. "Priority passengers get preference in double-booking scenarios." "There was no double-booking," Marcus interjected. "Was there, Michael?" Sterling looked at his assistant, who was furiously tapping on a tablet. "No, sir," the assistant said, her voice trembling. "Seat 1A was purchased by Helios Corporate. Seat 1D was purchased by Eleanor Vance. There is no overlap. The flight is full, but not oversold. Mr. Mills manually entered a conflict code into the system 5 minutes ago to justify a removal." The air left the room. It was undeniable proof of fraud. Bradford had falsified a computer entry to kick a black man off the plane to please a wealthy white woman. The police officer stepped back, creating distance between himself and Bradford. "Mr. Thorne," the officer said, "if this man filed a false police report claiming you were aggressive, that is a crime. Do you wish to press charges?" Marcus looked at Bradford. The purser was sweating profusely now, the gel in his hair beginning to melt. "Not yet," Marcus said. "I'm not done with him, or his crew, or Mrs. Vance." Marcus turned to Sterling. "Michael, I want the plane reconnected to ground power. Keep the engines off. I want the cabin doors open. I want the boarding music off. I want absolute silence on that aircraft." "Yes, Mr. Thorne, immediately," Sterling barked at his team. "And Michael," Marcus added, stepping closer to the director, "I want you to bring me the employment contracts for the entire cabin crew of Flight 404. And bring me a pair of scissors." "Scissors, sir?" "Yes." "To cut the plastic access cards," Marcus said coldly. "I'm going back on board." "Sir," Bradford stammered, trying to block the path back to the plane. "You can't go back in there. The passengers. Mrs. Vance. It will be a scene." Marcus stopped inches from Bradford's face. He looked down at the man. "Get out of my way, Bradford, or you won't just lose your job. I'll make sure you lose your pension, your flight benefits, and your ability to work in any industry that requires a background check. Move." Bradford collapsed against the wall of the jet bridge, sliding down until he was squatting on his heels, defeated. Marcus straightened his hoodie. He picked up his briefcase. "Gentlemen," he said to the police officers, "please accompany me. I want witnesses." He turned and walked back toward the open door of the Boeing 777 C-7. The darkness inside the plane awaited him, but he was bringing the fire. The atmosphere inside the first-class cabin was suffocating. With the auxiliary power unit, APU, cut by Marcus's remote order, the air conditioning had died. The temperature was rising rapidly, fueled by the body heat of 300 passengers and the stagnant air of the tarmac. The emergency floor lighting cast eerie, long shadows against the walls, turning the luxury cabin into a gloomy, claustrophobic tunnel. Mrs. Eleanor Vance was fanning herself furiously with a safety card. She was loudly berating a junior flight attendant named Jennifer. "This is unacceptable. It's roasting in here. Where is the captain? Where is that incompetent purser? I want champagne on ice immediately to compensate for this." Jennifer, a young woman who had followed Bradford's lead earlier, looked on the verge of tears. "I'm sorry, Mum. The galleys are unpowered. We can't access the fridge locks." "Useless," Eleanor spat. "The whole lot of you. This is what happens when standards drop." Suddenly, the heavy thud of footsteps on the galley floor stopped the conversation. Every head in first class turned toward the front galley. Marcus Thorne stepped through the entryway. He didn't look like a passenger anymore. In the dim emergency light, with 2 armed police officers flanking him and the airport director trailing him like a servant, he looked like a judge walking onto the scaffold. A gasp went through the cabin. "He's back," someone whispered. "I thought he was arrested." Eleanor dropped her safety card. Her jaw tightened. "You!" she shrieked, standing up. "What are you doing back here? Did you break out of custody? Officer, arrest this man. He is trespassing." The police officers didn't move. They stood with their hands clasped behind their backs, staring straight ahead. Marcus walked slowly down the aisle. He stopped at seat 1A, placed his briefcase down, and then turned to face the cabin. He stood directly in the center of the aisle, commanding the space. "Captain Henderson," Marcus shouted, his voice booming without the need for a PA system. "Front and center." The cockpit door opened. Captain Henderson, a grey-haired veteran pilot who had been hiding in the flight deck trying to reach operations, stepped out. He looked confused, wiping sweat from his brow with a handkerchief. He saw the police, the director, and the man in the hoodie. "Who are you?" Henderson asked, trying to sound authoritative, but failing. "You're the passenger Bradford removed. You need to leave my aircraft." "It's not your aircraft, Captain," Marcus said calmly. "Excuse me." "This aircraft," Marcus said, tapping the wall of the galley. "Registration N404MX belongs to Meridian Airways. Meridian Airways is a wholly owned subsidiary of Helios Holdings, and I am Marcus Thorne, the CEO and majority shareholder of Helios." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence where you could hear a heart break. Eleanor Vance froze. Her mouth, which had been open to shout another insult, stayed open, but no sound came out. She blinked rapidly, her brain trying to process the information. The thug in the hoodie owned the plane. He owned the seat. He owned the company. I don't believe you," Eleanor stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "You're lying. You're just some what, Mrs. Vance?" Marcus asked, turning his gaze on her. It was a physical weight. "Say it. You had no trouble saying it earlier. Finish the sentence." She shrank back into her seat. She couldn't say it. Not now. Not when the airport director was nodding deferentially to him. Marcus turned to the rest of the cabin. "I apologize to the other passengers for this delay. I intended to fly quietly to London to review our operations. Instead, I have been given a front row seat to a culture of rot within this company." He looked at the crew. Bradford had crept back onto the plane and was standing by the door, looking like a ghost. Jennifer and the other attendants were huddled together. "Bradford Mills," Marcus said. "Step forward." Bradford moved forward, his legs shaking so bad he almost tripped. "You falsified a manifest. You lied to a federal officer. You discriminated against a paying customer. And you bullied your junior staff into compliance." Marcus held out his hand. Michael Sterling, the director, slapped a thick file folder into it. Marcus opened it. "You have been with us for 7 years. In that time, You have blocked 3 promotions for minority staff members. You have 5 complaints for rudeness. And today, you tried to humiliate me." Marcus closed the folder with a snap that sounded like a gunshot. "You are fired, effective immediately, for cause." Bradford began to sob. "Please, sir, I have a mortgage. You should have thought about that before you treated a human being like garbage," Marcus said. "Hand over your badge and your ID, now." With trembling hands, Bradford unclipped his wings and his airport ID. He handed them to Marcus. Marcus handed them to Sterling. "Escort him off the property," Marcus ordered the police. "If he returns to the airport, arrest him for trespassing." As the police dragged a weeping Bradford away, Marcus turned his eyes to the rest of the crew. Jennifer, Sarah, Mark. He read their names from the file. We were just following orders," Jennifer cried. "Bradford is the purser. We had to do what he said." "You had a choice," Marcus said, gently but firmly. "You saw what was happening. You saw a man being targeted, and you said nothing. You watched. Silence is complicit." He looked at Captain Henderson. "And you, Captain? You hid in the cockpit. You let your purser run a fiefdom in the cabin because you didn't want to deal with the drama." "I fly the plane, Mr. Thorne," Henderson said defensively. "I don't manage the cabin." "You are the captain," Marcus said. "Everything on this vessel is under your command. You failed." Marcus looked at the group. "I am suspending the entire flight crew, pending a full investigation. Grab your bags. Get off my plane. A replacement crew is being called in from the reserve pool. They will be here in 45 minutes. The crew was stunned. They had just been fired or suspended, en masse. In the span of 5 minutes, their careers were in ashes. They scrambled to grab their totes from the overhead bins, heads down, avoiding the gaze of the passengers. When the crew was gone, the cabin was quiet again. Only the passengers remained. And Eleanor Vance. Marcus walked over to seat 1D. He stood over her. She was clutching her designer bag, looking up at him with terror. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal fear of social and financial ruin. "Now," Marcus said softly. "About you, Mrs. Vance." I didn't know," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I was just having a bad day. Stress, you know how it is." "Stress," Marcus repeated. "You called me a thug. You said I belonged in the back. You said I made you unsafe because of my face." He pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and held it up. It was a live feed from the lounge security cameras, recorded earlier. It showed her screaming at the receptionist. Then he played the audio recorded on his phone from the moment she boarded. Her voice, shrill and hateful, filled the quiet cabin. "He looks like a thug. Diversity quota." "This isn't stress," Marcus said. "This is who you are." He looked at Michael Sterling. "Michael, what is the status of Mrs. Vance's ticket?" Sterling cleared his throat. "It is a full-fare first-class ticket, sir." "Refund it," Marcus said. "Refund it?" Eleanor looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. You're letting me fly?" "No," Marcus said. "I'm refunding it because I don't want a single cent of your money on my books. It's dirty money." He leaned in close. "Mrs. Vance, you are hereby banned from Meridian Airways. You are banned from our partner airlines. And since Helios Holdings also owns the major lounge networks in 3 terminals, you are banned from those as well." "You can't do that," she shrieked, the entitlement rushing back as the shock wore off. "My husband is Richard Vance. He approves the zoning for this airport. He will shut you down." Marcus laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Richard Vance?" Marcus asked. "The councilman? The one currently under investigation for kickbacks regarding the construction contracts for Terminal 5? Eleanor went pale. How do you know that? Because, Marcus said, his smile sharp as a razor, I'm the one who provided the evidence to the FBI this morning. Why do you think I was in New York? I wasn't just buying an airline. I was cleaning house. He stood up straight and pointed to the door. Get off my plane, Mrs. Vance, before I have the officers drag you off. And you can tell Richard that Marcus Thorne sends his regards. Eleanor Vance scrambled out of her seat, her cashmere coat catching on the armrest. She grabbed her bag and ran down the aisle, the eyes of every passenger burning into her. She didn't look back. She fled into the jet bridge, into a world that had just become significantly smaller for her. Marcus exhaled. He looked around the cabin. The passengers were staring at him. I apologize for the heat, Marcus said, his voice returning to a calm, professional tone. The new crew will be here shortly. The AC will be back on in 5 minutes. To compensate you for this ordeal, every passenger on this flight will receive a full refund and a voucher for a future round-trip ticket anywhere we fly. A tentative clapping started from the back of the cabin. Then the businessman in 1F started clapping. Soon, the whole first-class cabin was applauding. Marcus didn't smile. He sat down in seat 1A. He opened his book. But the story wasn't over. The karma was just getting warmed up. The rest of Flight 404 to London was unnervingly smooth. The new cabin crew, a reserve team pulled from the standby lounge, treated Marcus not like a CEO, but like a deity. The service was flawless, the champagne flowed for the other passengers, and the air conditioning hummed with a renewed, apologetic vigor. But while the cabin was quiet, the world below was catching fire. About 2 hours into the flight over the dark Atlantic, Marcus connected his phone to the onboard Wi-Fi. His notifications were frozen, a solid block of alerts that wouldn't scroll. When the screen finally refreshed, he saw why. A passenger in seat 2A, a young tech entrepreneur named Jason, who wore a beanie and had millions of TikTok followers, had recorded the entire incident. He had uploaded it 30 minutes ago. The caption was simple. Karen tries to kick a black man out of first class. Turns out he owns the airline. Instant karma. Dorsax Justice. Russia CEO. Helios. The view count was already at 4.2 million. Marcus clicked the video. The angle was perfect. It showed Eleanor's sneering face as she said, "He looks like a thug." It showed Bradford's sweaty, arrogant dismissal. And then, the pivot, the moment Marcus stood up, the arrival of the police, and the devastating reveal. I'm not a passenger. I'm the owner. The internet was feasting. Force of justice served. The way my jaw dropped when he pulled the black card. That wasn't a credit card. That was a death sentence for her social life. Hated flight risk. I used to work for that purser, Bradford. He was a nightmare. So glad he finally got fired. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. Eat the rich. Eleanor Vance. Isn't that the wife of Councilman Vance? The guy pushing for the new terminal contracts? This looks bad. Marcus watched the comments roll in. He wasn't doing this for fame. He hated the spotlight, but he understood the power of the narrative. This wasn't just about him. It was a signal to the market. He drafted an email to Linda. Subject: the Vance video. Linda, don't take the video down. Let it run. But issue a formal press release from Helios Holdings within the hour. Title it, A New Standard. State that under my leadership, Meridian Airways has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination from passengers or crew. Also, announce that we are reviewing all past complaints against Bradford Mills that were previously ignored by HR. I want the public to know this isn't just a viral moment. It's a purge. He hit send. Back in New York, the video was hitting the mainstream news cycle. TMZ had picked it up. The Daily Mail had a headline running, "AIR Rage. Billionaire Marcus Thorne evicts socialite from first class." But for Eleanor Vance, who was currently sitting in the back of an Uber because her private car service had mysteriously cancelled on her, the reality hadn't fully set in. She was furiously typing on her phone, trying to get her side of the story out on Facebook. "I was attacked," she wrote on her community page. "A violent man intimidated me, and the corrupt airline staff sided with him. I am the victim." She hit post. Instantly the comments flooded in, but they weren't from her sympathetic neighbors in the Upper East Side. They were from strangers who had seen the video. "We saw the video, Eleanor. You're a racist. Violent? He was reading a book. Your husband is going to love this." Eleanor deleted the post, her hands shaking. She looked out the window. The Uber was pulling up to her estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. She expected to see the quiet, manicured lawns of her sanctuary. Instead, she saw news vans. CNN, Fox News, local affiliates. They were camped out at the gates of the Vance estate. The moment the Uber slowed down, the swarm descended. Flashes blinded her through the tinted glass. "Mrs. Vance, do you have a comment on your ban from Meridian?" "Mrs. Vance, did you call the CEO a thug?" "Mrs. Vance, is it true your husband is resigning?" Resigning? Eleanor's blood ran cold. She pushed her way out of the car, shielding her face with her bag, the same bag she had flaunted in the lounge, and sprinted toward the front door. She fumbled with her keys, practically falling into the foyer. The house was dark, which was odd. It was only 8 p.m. "Richard!" she called out. "Richard, you won't believe what happened. These people are crazy. I'm going to sue the airline." She walked into the living room. Richard Vance was sitting in his leather armchair by the unlit fireplace. He was holding a glass of scotch, and the bottle on the table was half empty. He didn't look up. "Richard?" "You," Richard said, his voice a low growl. "You stupid, arrogant woman." "Excuse me?" Eleanor dropped her bag. "I was humiliated today. I was kicked off a plane by some usurper. And now the press is outside." Richard stood up. He threw a newspaper onto the coffee table. It wasn't today's paper. It was a printout of an email. "Do you know who Marcus Thorne is?" Richard shouted, the vein in his neck bulging. "He isn't just an airline owner, Eleanor. He sits on the board of the Infrastructure Committee, the committee that decides which construction firms get the airport contracts." Eleanor blinked. "So?" "Tell him to fix this." "Fix it?" Richard laughed, a maniacal sound. "He sent a file to the FBI this morning, Eleanor, a file linking my shell companies to the terminal bids. He was holding on to it, waiting for the right time. But when you decided to abuse him on that plane, when you decided to make a scene, he pulled the trigger early." Richard walked over to the window and looked at the reporters outside. "My office was raided an hour ago. They took the computers. They took the files. The governor just called me. He's asking for my resignation by morning." He turned to face her. His eyes were full of hate. "I spent 30 years building this career. 30 years of deals, of handshakes, of keeping things quiet. And you burned it all down because you didn't want to sit across from a black man." I didn't know," Eleanor whispered, tears finally spilling over. "I was just trying to get comfortable." "Well, get comfortable with this," Richard said, finishing his drink. "Our assets have been frozen. The lawyers say with the video evidence of your behavior, no jury will sympathize with us. The defamation suit you wanted to file, it's dead. We are toxic, Eleanor. We are radioactive." He walked past her toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" she cried. "To pack," he said. "I'm staying at the club, if they'll even let me in." Eleanor stood alone in the dark, multi-million-dollar foyer. Outside, the cameras were flashing. Inside, her phone buzzed again. It was a notification from the Meridian Airways app. "Dear Eleanor Vance, your Platinum Legacy status has been revoked. Your mileage balance of 1.2 million miles has been voided due to violation of terms of service. Have a nice day." She screamed, throwing the phone against the wall. It shattered, but the silence that followed was even louder. 6 months later. The fall of the House of Vance had been swift, brutal, and televised. It became a case study in PR crisis management classes and law schools across the country. The video of the plane incident had accumulated over 45 million views. It had spawned memes, parodies, and late-night talk show monologues. But for Eleanor and Richard, it was a tragedy in slow motion. Richard Vance had tried to fight the corruption charges. He hired the best defense attorney in New York, a man named Alan Dershowitz-type figure known as the Shark. But Marcus Thorne had been thorough. The dossier he provided to the FBI didn't just have theories, it had bank transfer numbers, dates, and recorded conversations. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Richard was found guilty on 12 counts of wire fraud and bribery. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. But the real drama, the twist that the public didn't see coming, happened in civil court. Eleanor, desperate to salvage her reputation and facing a divorce from Richard, who blamed her entirely for his downfall, decided to double down. She found a sleazy lawyer who convinced her she had a case against Marcus Thorne for emotional distress and public defamation. They filed a lawsuit seeking $50 million in damages. It was a mistake. Marcus Thorne didn't settle. He didn't offer go-away money. He showed up to the deposition personally. The scene was a conference room in Midtown Manhattan. Eleanor sat across from Marcus, looking gaunt. Her blonde hair dyed a darker brown in an attempt to hide her identity. "Mr. Thorne," her lawyer sneered, "you released that video to destroy my client, didn't you? You leveraged your power to ruin a defenseless woman." Marcus leaned forward. He placed a single sheet of paper on the table. "I didn't release the video," Marcus said calmly. "A passenger did. But I did authorize the release of this." He slid the paper over. It was a transcript from the airline's internal server. "What is this?" the lawyer asked. "It's the log of Mrs. Vance's travel history for the last 10 years, Marcus explained. "We did a deep audit. It turns out Mrs. Vance has a habit of claiming lost luggage on almost every international flight she takes. She claims the bags contained jewelry, designer clothes, electronics. Meridian Airways has paid her over $150,000 in insurance claims over the last decade." Eleanor went pale. She stopped breathing. "However," Marcus continued, "we cross-referenced security footage from the airports. Mrs. Vance never checked any bags on those flights. She walked on with a carry-on and walked off with a carry-on. She filed false claims for bags that never existed." The lawyer looked at Eleanor. "Is this true?" Everyone does it," Eleanor stammered. "It's just a little extra cash. The airline can afford it." "That is insurance fraud," Marcus said. "It is a felony. And since the mail was used to send the checks, it is mail fraud. That is federal." Marcus stood up and buttoned his jacket. "I am countersuing for the return of the $150,000, plus legal fees, plus damages to the brand, and I am turning this file over to the district attorney this afternoon." He looked at Eleanor one last time. "You wanted to sue me for distress? Mrs. Vance, you should have just taken the refund and walked away." The lawsuit was dropped the next day. But the damage was done. The district attorney picked up the fraud case. Eleanor Vance, the woman who thought she was too good to sit near a black man, was now facing prison time of her own. To pay for her legal defense, she had to sell the estate in Greenwich. It was bought by a limited liability company, LLC, called Phoenix Rising. On the day she moved out, the movers were hauling her antique furniture into a rental truck. She looked at the paperwork for the sale. She was curious who had bought the house at such a discount, as she was desperate for cash. She looked at the signature on the bottom of the deed transfer. Managing partner, Linda Graves. On behalf of Helios Holdings, Employee Housing Trust. Eleanor gasped. Marcus hadn't bought the house for himself. He had bought it to turn it into a retreat center for his airline staff. The house she had barred riff-raff from entering would now host flight attendants, baggage handlers, and mechanics for summer retreats. It was the ultimate poetic justice. As Eleanor drove away in her modest sedan, leaving her life of luxury behind forever, she turned on the radio to drown out her thoughts. The news anchor was speaking. And in business news, Meridian Airways has just reported record profits for the third quarter. CEO Marcus Thorne attributes the success to a new company culture that prioritizes respect and dignity. The airline has also launched a scholarship program for underprivileged youth looking to enter the aviation industry. Eleanor turned the radio off. She drove into the silence, a nobody in a world she used to think she owned. The grand opening of the Helios Employee Retreat was a joyous affair. The sprawling lawn of the former Vance estate in Greenwich was no longer quiet and exclusionary. It was alive with the sound of laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. Flight attendants, baggage handlers, gate agents, and mechanics mingled by the pool where Eleanor Vance used to sip her lonely martinis. Marcus Thorne stood on the balcony of the master bedroom, Eleanor's old sanctuary, overlooking the party. He held a glass of iced tea, watching a group of ramp workers playing volleyball on the manicured grass. "It's a good look for the house," a voice said behind him. Marcus turned. It was Linda, his chief of staff. She was holding an old, tattered personnel file. "Did you find it?" Marcus asked, his voice softer than usual. "I did," Linda said, handing him the folder. It was buried in the deep archives of the Meridian HR basement. They were scheduled to be shredded next week. We got there just in time. Marcus took the folder. The name on the tab was faded, typed on an old typewriter. Sarah Thorne. Position, janitorial staff. Termination date, May 14th, 2003. Marcus opened the file. His hand trembled slightly, a rare show of emotion for the stoic CEO. He traced his finger over the reason for termination. Reason? Theft. Accused by Platinum member Mrs. Eleanor Vance of stealing a diamond earring in the first-class lounge. No evidence found, but dismissed to appease the client. "She didn't steal it," Marcus whispered, the memory fighting its way to the surface. "I was there that day. I was 12 years old. I was sitting in the break room, waiting for her shift to end so we could take the bus home." He looked out at the party, but he saw a different scene. He saw his mother, crying in the rain outside Terminal 4, holding a box with her uniform inside. He saw a younger Eleanor Vance walking past them to her limo, not even looking at the woman whose life she had just destroyed over a piece of jewelry she probably found in her purse 2 days later. "My mother lost her health insurance when she was fired," Marcus said to Linda. 6 months later, when the pneumonia hit, she was afraid to go to the doctor because we couldn't pay. By the time I forced her to go, it was too late. Linda remained silent. She knew this was the engine that drove him. This was the fire. "I stood at her grave," Marcus continued, his eyes hard. "And I made a promise. I promised I wouldn't just survive. I would succeed. I would become so powerful that no one like Eleanor Vance could ever hurt us again. And I promised I would buy that airline and turn it into something she would hate, something fair. He closed the folder. It took me 22 years, he said. But I did it. I didn't just kick her off a plane, Linda. I evicted her from her life. There's one more thing, Linda said, pulling a small envelope from her pocket. When the movers were clearing out the master closet, Eleanor's private safe, they found this. It had fallen behind the shelving unit years ago. Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was a single dusty diamond earring. The twist was a knife in the gut. Eleanor hadn't lost it at the airport. She hadn't been robbed. She had dropped it in her own safe and blamed the black cleaning lady because it was easier than admitting she was careless. Marcus stared at the diamond. It sparkled in the sunlight, cold and indifferent. It was a tiny rock that had cost his mother her life. "What do you want to do with it?" Linda asked. Marcus looked at the volleyball game below. He saw a young woman, a cleaner named Maria, laughing as she served the ball. She looked a little like his mother. "Sell it," Marcus said, tossing the earring to Linda, "and put the money into the Sarah Thorne Scholarship Fund for the children of our janitorial staff. Let her diamond pay for their college degrees." He turned back to the view. "The debt is paid," Marcus said. Below him, the party continued. The house that hatred built was now filled with love. And somewhere in a small, rented apartment in a rundown part of the city, Eleanor Vance was washing her own dishes, wondering why the universe had turned against her, never realizing that the karma hadn't started on the plane. It had started 20 years ago, with a lie about a janitor. Marcus took a sip of his tea. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like justice. And that is the story of how one act of arrogance brought down an empire. It's a powerful reminder that you never truly know who you are dealing with. Eleanor Vance thought she was kicking a nobody out of his seat, but she was actually handing the keys to her destruction to the one man who had the power and the history to use them. Karma isn't always instant. Sometimes it waits 20 years. Sometimes it waits for you to make that one final mistake before it brings the hammer down. Marcus Thorne proved that true power isn't about shouting at staff or flashing gold cards. It's about patience, strategy, and standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. What do you think? Did Eleanor deserve to lose everything, or was the punishment too harsh? And have you ever seen instant karma hit an entitled person in real life? I want to hear your stories. Drop a comment down below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and twists, please blast that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new drama. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind, because you never know who is sitting in the next seat.